I have made almost every kind of Bitcoin mistake. I panic sold at the bottom. I left Bitcoin on an exchange that nearly went under. I clicked a phishing link that almost cost me everything. I fell for a scam. I lost access to a wallet. I chased altcoin gains and came back with less. I sent Bitcoin to the wrong address. I almost sold everything at exactly the wrong moment. I bought at the top. I watched it crash 50, 60, 70% and could not control what I felt. I am not telling you this to be dramatic. I am telling you because I eventually noticed something. Every single one of those mistakes had the same thing at its root. Rhyme sats. And this is the most important thing I have learned from all of it. My first instinct was that the common thread was ignorance. I did not know enough. I had not done enough research. If I had understood Bitcoin more deeply before I bought, the mistakes would not have happened. I held that explanation for a while. It felt reasonable, and it led me to spend a lot of time learning, reading, listening, building what felt like a genuine understanding of how Bitcoin worked, why it had value, what the history looked like, what the risks were. And then I made more mistakes. Not the same mistakes, different mistakes. More sophisticated ones in some ways, but mistakes nonetheless. And the ignorance explanation started to look incomplete. Because I was making mistakes at the same time as I was accumulating knowledge. The knowledge was real, but it was not protecting me in the way I had expected it to. So I looked more carefully at the specific moments when things had gone wrong. Not the outcomes, the moments, the decision points, the seconds before the click or the sell or the send. And what I found was this. Every single mistake happened in a moment when I was not thinking clearly. Not because I was stupid or careless, because something was happening to my ability to reason that I had not noticed and had not accounted for. Sometimes it was fear. The price was falling and the fear was loud enough that the arguments for holding, which I knew and believed, became somehow unavailable. I could recite them, but I could not feel them. The emotional signal was drowning out the intellectual content. Sometimes it was excitement. The price was rising, something was moving fast, and the urgency to act before I missed it was overriding the caution I would have applied in a calmer state. Sometimes it was social pressure. Someone around me was doing something, and the discomfort of being the one who was not was nudging me toward a decision I would not have made, alone with no time pressure and no audience. Sometimes it was just the cognitive shortcut that happens when you are tired or distracted or rushing. The clipboard hijacker worked because I was moving fast. The phishing link looked legitimate because I was not paying close attention. The wrong address got confirmed because I checked the first 4 characters and assumed the rest. The common thread across all of it was not ignorance. It was the gap between what I knew when I was thinking clearly and what I was able to access when something was disrupting my ability to think clearly. That gap is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that I am not suited to holding Bitcoin. It is a feature of how human minds work under conditions of fear, excitement, urgency, and social pressure. Those conditions do not make you stupid. They make your most considered thinking temporarily less available. Here is why this matters more than I initially understood. Most Bitcoin education is aimed at filling the knowledge gap. Learn more. Understand the technology better. Read the history. Know the arguments. That is all genuinely useful. But it addresses the wrong problem if the mistakes are not primarily caused by ignorance. If the mistakes are primarily caused by disrupted reasoning, the solution is not more knowledge. The solution is building structures that protect your considered judgment from the moments when your reasoning is impaired. This is what the best Bitcoin security practices are actually doing, even when they are not described that way. Making it physically difficult to sell during a crash, not having easy access to exchange accounts, not keeping significant amounts where they are one tap away from liquidation. These are not just security measures. They are friction against the worst decisions made in the worst moments. Sending a test transaction before the full amount. This is not just a technical precaution, it is a pause. A moment between intention and consequence that gives the considered judgment time to catch up with the emotional urgency. Writing the seed phrase on paper and storing it somewhere not immediately accessible. This is not just about fire protection, it is about making the irreversible action slightly slower than the impulsive one. Holding Bitcoin through those periods does not require perfect knowledge. It requires systems that protect your considered judgment when your emotions are pulling in another direction, often without consciously realizing that is what they were doing. If this is landing for you, hitting subscribe means you will not miss the rest of what is coming on this channel. Here's the practical version of everything I just said. Before any significant Bitcoin action, ask yourself one question. Would I make this decision if I were calm, alone, and under no time pressure? If the answer is no, wait. Bitcoin will be there tomorrow. The blockchain will still be running. The address will still be valid. The wallet will still be accessible. In Bitcoin, urgency is often a feeling rather than a fact. The one thing every mistake had in common was a moment when the feeling was louder than the reasoning. Not because the reasoning was absent, because something had temporarily made it harder to hear. Building the structures that keep the reasoning audible may be the most important practical work of holding Bitcoin. It is more important than knowing the technology, more important than understanding the history, more important than having the strongest hardware wallet and the most secure seed phrase setup. Because all of that knowledge and all of that security is only as good as the decisions you make in the moments when it is hardest to think clearly. Let's bring it together for the last time in this series. I made almost every mistake it is possible to make with Bitcoin, and every one of them had the same thing at its root. Not ignorance. The gap between what I knew when I was thinking clearly and what I could access when something was disrupting my ability to think clearly. Fear, excitement, urgency, social pressure, distraction. Most Bitcoin education addresses the knowledge gap, but if the mistakes are caused by disrupted reasoning rather than ignorance, more knowledge is not enough. The solution is building structures that protect your considered judgment from your impulsive responses. Friction against the worst decisions in the worst moments. Before any significant Bitcoin action, ask whether you are in a state you would trust for a decision this consequential. Would I make this decision if I were calm, alone, and under no time pressure? If not, wait. In Bitcoin, urgency is often a feeling rather than a fact. The most important work in Bitcoin is keeping the reasoning audible in the moments when it is hardest to hear. Every mistake. One thing in common. That is it. If you have just found this series, go back to the beginning. The first mistakes video is where this whole journey started, with the panic sell that taught me the first lesson. Watch that next. Stack smart. Stay curious. See you in the next stack.